In the vast and unforgiving landscapes of the African savannah, where the laws of nature are dictated by survival of the fittest, a tale of unrivaled dominance unfolded during the late 2000s. This is the story of the Mapogo Lions, a coalition of 6 male lions whose reign of terror and unprecedented brutality forever altered the dynamics of the Sabi Sands Game Reserve in South Africa. The Mapogo coalition became legendary, feared not only by other lions, but by every creature that shared their territory. Their story is one of power, strategy, and a deep understanding of the harsh realities of life in the wild. The Mapogo Lions, named after a South African security company, were not just ordinary lions. They were brothers and half-brothers, bonded by blood and a shared destiny. Their alliance defied the typical behavior of male lions, who usually compete for dominance and control over territories. Instead of turning against each other, the Mapogo Lions remained united, forming one of the most formidable coalitions ever recorded in the history of African wildlife. Their rise to power began in the mid-2000s, when they set out from their natal territory in search of new lands to conquer. As they moved through the vast expanses of Sabi Sands, they left a trail of destruction in their wake. The Mapogo Lions did not just seek to dominate, they sought to annihilate. They killed rival males, slaughtered cubs, and took over prides with a ruthlessness that was unparalleled. This strategy of total domination ensured their control over a vast territory and a large number of females, securing their legacy as the deadliest lion coalition ever known. But the Mapogo Lions were not just brutal killers. They were also strategic and intelligent predators. Their success was not just due to their numbers, but also to their ability to work together, leveraging each other's strengths and compensating for their weaknesses. This made them nearly invincible, and for years, they ruled over Sabi Sands with an iron paw. As we delve deeper into their story, we will explore the formation of this deadly coalition, the strategies they employed to maintain their dominance, the battles they fought, and the ultimate downfall of the Mapogo Lions. This narrative will take us into the heart of the African wilderness, where life and death are constantly intertwined, and where the Mapogo Lions became legends. As the Mapogo Lions solidified their dominance over the Sabi Sands Game Reserve, their reign of terror reached its peak. The coalition, now infamous for their ruthlessness, had carved out an empire that extended across a vast area, displacing and decimating other lion prides with brutal efficiency. The sheer scale of their power was unprecedented. They controlled an estimated territory of over 70,000 acres and commanded several lionesses across multiple prides. But with great power came the inevitable challenge. And for the Mapogo Lions, the biggest threat would come from within and from a formidable new coalition. Hello guys. If you have liked these stories and have not subscribed yet, support our work and subscribe to the channel to help us. At the height of their power, the Mapogo coalition was an unstoppable force. The 6 lions, Makulu, Rasta, Pretty Boy, Kinky Tail, Mr. T, and Dreadlocks, had established themselves as the apex predators in their domain. Their coalition was held together by a combination of blood ties, shared experiences, and a mutual understanding of the brutal realities of life in the wild. This bond allowed them to work in unison, executing complex strategies during hunts and battles that no other coalition could match. Their dominance was marked by an unmatched aggression. The Mapogo Lions were known to attack and kill rival males on sight, ensuring that no threats to their reign remained. They would also systematically eliminate cubs in the prides they took over, a strategy known as infanticide, which was meant to bring the lionesses into estrus more quickly, allowing the Mapogos to sire their own offspring. This level of brutality ensured that their bloodline would spread rapidly, further cementing their control over the territory. The coalition's most feared and aggressive members were Kinky Tail and Mr. T, 2 brothers who often spearheaded the attacks against rivals. Kinky Tail, in particular, was known for his fearlessness in battle, while Mr. T, with his distinctive mohawk-like mane, became infamous for his ferocity. Together, they were the driving force behind many of the coalition's most brutal conquests. Despite their overwhelming power, the Mapogo coalition was not immune to the forces that govern the lives of all wild animals, aging, injury, and internal strife. As time passed, tensions began to simmer within the group. While Makulu, the oldest and most experienced, was often seen as the leader, his position was never absolute. The younger and more aggressive members, particularly Mr. T and Kinky Tail, began to challenge his authority. This internal tension was exacerbated by the harsh realities of their lifestyle. Constant battles, territorial patrols, and the need to maintain control over a large area took their toll on the coalition. The lions began to show signs of wear, with injuries accumulating and age starting to catch up with the older members. The bond that had once held them together started to fray, as individual ambitions and the struggle for survival began to overshadow their unity. As the Mapogo Lions grappled with their internal challenges, a new threat was looming on the horizon. A coalition of 4 young and powerful male lions, known as the Majingilani, had started to rise in a territory adjacent to the Mapogos domain. The Majingilani coalition was everything the Mapogos had once been: strong, ambitious, and ruthless. They had heard of the Mapogos dominance, and rather than be deterred, they were driven by the desire to claim that power for themselves. The Majingilani were a tightly knit group, much like the Mapogos in their prime, and they brought a fresh energy and determination to the battlefield. Unlike many other lions who might have avoided direct confrontation with the infamous Mapogos, the Majingilani saw them as the ultimate challenge. They knew that to become the undisputed rulers of Sabi Sands, they would have to defeat the Mapogos. The inevitable clash between the Mapogo and Majingilani coalitions would be a battle for supremacy unlike any other. The first major confrontation occurred in 2010, and it was a brutal and bloody encounter. Kinky Tail and Mr. T, who had become increasingly isolated from the rest of the Mapogos, were the first to engage with the Majingilani. In a fierce battle that lasted for hours, Kinky Tail was tragically overwhelmed and killed by the combined strength of the 4 Majingilani lions. His death marked a turning point in the power dynamics of the region. Mr. T, devastated by the loss of his brother and now facing the overwhelming odds alone, was forced to retreat. The Majingilani coalition, emboldened by their victory, continued their campaign against the remaining Mapogo lions. One by one, the Mapogos were outmaneuvered, their numbers dwindling as they faced the relentless assaults of the younger and stronger Majingilani. The tide had turned, and the once invincible Mapogo coalition was now on the defensive, fighting a losing battle against the new rulers of the land. The downfall of the Mapogo Lions was as swift as their rise to power had been. The remaining members of the coalition were either killed or driven out of their territories, forced to live out their days as solitary lions or in exile. The fall of the Mapogo Lions was not a sudden event, but a slow, agonizing unraveling that played out over several years. What began as a seemingly invincible coalition, feared by all who crossed their path, eventually fractured under the relentless pressure of time, internal strife, and external threats. The remaining Mapogo Lions, once the undisputed kings of Sabi Sands, now found themselves facing the harshest reality of the wild. Survival is a battle that never ends. After the death of Kinky Tail, the Mapogo coalition was left reeling. Mr. T, the lion who had been Kinky Tail's closest ally, was now alone, driven by a burning desire for revenge and the weight of an empire slipping through his claws. The once formidable bond between the Mapogos had been shattered, and each lion was forced to confront the reality of their diminished power. Mr. T's grief over Kinky Tail's death manifested as a ferocity that knew no bounds. He was now a lion on a mission, fueled by anger and a need to prove that the Mapogo name still carried the weight of fear and respect. He roamed the territories, challenging any lion that dared to cross his path. But the reality was that he was fighting a losing battle. The Majingilani, sensing his vulnerability, were relentless in their pursuit, tracking him and slowly tightening their grip on the land that once belonged to the Mapogos. Meanwhile, Makulu, the oldest and wisest of the Mapogos, understood that the coalition's days were numbered. He had seen enough of the wild to know that the tide had turned, and there was no reclaiming what was lost. Unlike Mr. T, who sought to confront the Majingilani head-on, Makulu chose a different path. He retreated into the quieter, less contested areas of the reserve, where he could live out his days away from the brutal power struggles that had defined his life for so long. Pretty Boy and Rasta, once integral members of the coalition, found themselves increasingly isolated. The unity that had once been their greatest strength was now a distant memory, replaced by a sense of foreboding and loneliness. Each lion, now a shadow of his former self, was left to navigate the treacherous landscape of Sabi Sands without the support of the coalition. Their once vast territory was now fragmented, and their influence over the prides within it had diminished to a point where they were no longer the rulers, but the hunted. As Mr. T continued his solitary path, his behavior became increasingly erratic and dangerous. The loss of Kinky Tail had not only left him vulnerable, but had also unhinged him in ways that made him unpredictable, even to those who had once fought alongside him. Mr. T, the lion who had been known for his calculated aggression, was now driven by a primal instinct for survival that bordered on madness. He began launching desperate attacks on the Majingilane, often charging into battles that he had little hope of winning. These skirmishes were brutal and left Mr. T with numerous injuries, but he fought with a ferocity that defied his physical state. His actions were no longer about reclaiming power. They were about vengeance and a refusal to accept defeat. The wild, in all its unforgiving nature, had turned one of its most fearsome predators into a tragic figure, a king without a kingdom, fighting battles he knew he could not win. But the Majingilani were not to be underestimated. They had seen the cracks in Mr. T's armor and exploited them ruthlessly. Where the Mapogo coalition had once terrorized the savannah, the Majingilani now wielded that power. They moved strategically, wearing down Mr. T through relentless pressure, cutting off his access to resources and isolating him further from any potential allies. The psychological toll on Mr. T was immense. The lion who had once led his brothers into battle with unshakable confidence was now haunted by the specters of his past. Each defeat, each scar, was a reminder of what had been lost. The vast territories he once roamed with pride were now foreign lands, dominated by the very coalition that had dismantled everything he held dear. The Mapogo name, once synonymous with power and fear, was fading, and Mr. T could feel the weight of that legacy slipping away. The climax of Mr. T's tragic descent came in 2012, in a confrontation that would mark the end of the Mapogo era. The Majingilane had been patient, biding their time as they weakened Mr. T's position. They knew that to finally cement their dominance, they needed to eliminate the last vestige of the Mapogo legacy. And so, they hunted him, their movements calculated and precise, like a noose tightening around his neck. Mr. T, though aware of the impending danger, refused to flee. There was nowhere left to run, and in his heart he knew that the end was near. But he would not go quietly. In a final act of defiance, Mr. T confronted the Majingilane one last time. The battle that ensued was ferocious, with Mr. T fighting with a desperation that could only come from a lion who had nothing left to lose. The odds were stacked against him. 4 young, strong lions against one older, battle-worn warrior. But Mr. T fought as he always had, with a tenacity and courage that had defined his life. The battle was a testament to his strength and spirit, but it was also a heartbreaking reminder of the inevitability of time. Despite his best efforts, the numbers were too great, and the injuries he had sustained over the years had taken their toll. The Majingilane, merciless in their pursuit of power, delivered the final blows that ended Mr. T's life. His death was brutal and bloody, a stark contrast to the dominance he once enjoyed. With his passing, the last of the Mapogo Lions fell, and the Majingilane stood victorious. The era of the Mapogo was over, and a new reign began in the Sabi Sands. In the wake of Mr. T's death, Makulu lived out his final days in relative peace. He had chosen a different path, one of survival rather than confrontation. But even in his solitude, Makulu was a lion who had lived a life marked by power and dominance. The years of battle had left him scarred, but his mind remained sharp, and his instincts, honed by years of leading the Mapogo coalition, kept him alive. Makulu's territory was far removed from the turmoil that had consumed the rest of the coalition. Here, in the quiet parts of Sabi Sands, he hunted alone, avoiding the conflicts that raged on the borders of his domain. But time, the ultimate adversary, was catching up with him. His once powerful body was now slowed by age, and the injuries he had sustained in his youth made hunting more difficult. Despite his diminished state, Makulu's presence was still formidable. He was the last of the Mapogo, a relic of a time when his name alone could send tremors through the savannah. But the wild does not honor legacies, it only recognizes strength. As Makulu aged, he became more vulnerable, and eventually, he too succumbed to the inevitability of time. Unlike the violent end that met his brothers, Makulu likely passed away quietly, perhaps under the shade of a tree, or in the tall grass that had hidden him from view. His death was not marked by a battle, but by the quiet, dignified retreat that had defined his final years. With Makulu's passing, the last of the Mapogo Lions was gone, and with him, an era of unrivaled dominance in Sabi Sands came to a close. Even in death, the legacy of the Mapogo Lions echoed across the African plains. The Majingilani, who had claimed their territory, now ruled the land with the same ruthlessness that the Mapogos had once displayed. But they too would learn that power in the wild is fleeting, and that every coalition, no matter how strong, will eventually face a challenger. The story of the Mapogo Lions became a legend, told by rangers, documented by filmmakers, and studied by scientists. It was a tale of power, strategy, and the brutal realities of life in the wild. The Mapogos had rewritten the rules of lion behavior, showing that coalitions could dominate not just through numbers, but through sheer, unrelenting force. Their legacy also served as a cautionary tale. The aggressive tactics they used to maintain control, particularly their practice of infanticide, had lasting consequences on the lion population of Sabi Sands. Their actions disrupted the natural balance, leading to shifts in pride dynamics and genetic diversity that would be felt for generations. But beyond the ecological impact, the Mapogo Lions left a mark on the human imagination. They were more than just lions, they were symbols of the raw, untamed power of nature. Their story was one of triumph and tragedy, of brothers who rose to the heights of power and fell just as dramatically. The Mapogos showed the world the brutal beauty of the wild, a place where legends are born and die with the same relentless force that drives all life on Earth. The story of the Mapogo Lions is one of the most compelling narratives to emerge from the wilds of Africa, a saga that embodies the brutal realities of life on the savannah, where power is both earned and lost in the blink of an eye. It is a tale that has captivated wildlife enthusiasts, researchers and storytellers alike, offering a rare glimpse into the lives of some of nature's most formidable predators. As we conclude this narrative, we reflect on the rise, dominance, and eventual fall of the Mapogo Lions, and the lasting impact they have had on both the natural world and our understanding of it. From the moment the Mapogo Lions began their journey, it was clear that they were unlike any coalition seen before. Formed from a bond of brotherhood and shared blood, the 6 lions who made up the Mapogo coalition redefined what it meant to be a dominant force in the wild. Their strength was not merely in their numbers, but in their unwavering unity and the strategic brutality with which they approached their conquests. For years, the Mapogos ruled over the Sabi Sands Game Reserve with an iron paw. They conquered vast territories, dispatched rival males with lethal precision, and ensured their genetic legacy through the systematic elimination of any potential competition, whether it be rival males or cubs sired by others. Their dominance was absolute, their name synonymous with fear, and their presence enough to command respect from any who encountered them. But as with all things in nature, the Mapogos' reign was not destined to last forever. The wild is a place of constant change, where the only certainty is that nothing remains the same for long. As the Mapogos aged, the forces of time and nature began to erode the foundation of their power. What once was a united front began to fragment, and the very bonds that had made them strong started to fray under the pressures of survival. The downfall of the Mapogo Lions was as dramatic as their rise. Internal strife, the relentless march of time, and the emergence of a new, formidable coalition in the form of the Majingaleni all contributed to their eventual demise. The death of Kinky Tail marked the beginning of the end, and from that point on, the coalition that had once seemed invincible began to unravel. Mr. T's tragic descent into madness, driven by the loss of his brother and the relentless pursuit of the Majingalani, symbolized the final desperate gasps of a coalition that had once ruled supreme. His death, brutal and inevitable, marked the end of the Mapogo era and the rise of a new power in Sabi Sands. Makulu, the last surviving member of the coalition, lived out his days in solitude, a shadow of the lion who had once led one of the most feared coalitions in the wild. His quiet passing marked the close of a chapter in the history of Sabi Sands, but the story of the Mapogos did not end with his death. Instead, their legacy lived on, both in the physical landscape they once dominated and in the hearts and minds of those who learned of their story. The impact of the Mapogo Lions on the ecosystem of Sabi Sands was profound. Their aggressive tactics, particularly their practice of infanticide, had lasting effects on the lion population in the area, influencing pride dynamics and genetic diversity for years to come. But beyond their ecological impact, the Mapogos left an indelible mark on our understanding of lion behavior and the dynamics of power in the wild. The story of the Mapogo Lions has been immortalized in documentaries, books, and countless retellings by those who witnessed their reign. They have become legends, not just as lions, but as symbols of the raw, untamed power of nature. Their story is one of triumph and tragedy, of the brutal beauty of the wild, and of the inevitable cycle of life and death that governs all living things. As we reflect on the story of the Mapogo Lions, we are reminded of the complexity and harshness of the natural world. The wild is a place of constant struggle, where power is both a blessing and a curse, and where survival often comes at the expense of others. The Mapogo Lions, in their rise and fall, exemplified these truths, living out their lives according to the unforgiving laws of nature. Their story serves as a powerful reminder of the impermanence of power and the transient nature of dominance in the wild. No matter how strong or united a coalition may be, time and change are inevitable forces that spare no one. The Mapogos were once the kings of their domain, but even they could not escape the relentless march of time and the challenges posed by younger, stronger rivals. But perhaps the most enduring legacy of the Mapogo Lions is the way their story has captured the imagination of people around the world. Through their story, we are able to glimpse the raw, primal forces that drive life in the wild, a world where every day is a battle, and where the only constant is the ever-present struggle for survival. The Mapogo Lions will be remembered not just as a coalition of powerful predators, but as a symbol of the wild itself, beautiful, brutal, and forever untamed. Their story is a testament to the power of nature and a reminder of the fragile balance that sustains life on Earth. As we continue to study and learn from their legacy, the Mapogo Lions will remain a powerful reminder of the forces that shape the natural world and of the enduring mystery and majesty of the wild. The saga of the Mapogo Lions has come to an end, but their legend will live on, echoing across the savannas of Africa and in the hearts of those who seek to understand the wild. Would you like to make any revisions? Or is there anything else you would like to add or explore? And we have reached the end of another story. If you liked it, leave in the comments what else you want to see here. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you support us.